Bob Bostad is the answer. We all know that. Today's show, Locked On Badgers, we're talking offensive line preview. Let's go.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what is going on, everybody? My name is Ryan Herrings, your host of Locked On Badgers, here to cover your team every single day. Thank you so much for making this one of your first listens. Really, really, really do appreciate it. Football season's coming quick, and we got all the coverage for you here on Locked On. We're going to bring a friend of the show, Justin Jolka, back on the show to do the offensive line preview. We're going to go through it. This is a good one. You were on for the first preview, which was quarterbacks. Not
this one will be a far more positive podcast.
That one was painful, but offensive line is fun. So as we do in all of our preview shows, we're going to start. I'm just going to kind of run down the key players on the depth chart. Offensive line, obviously, a little bigger than the other spots, so we probably won't hit everybody. But this is what the first string looks like, and I'm going to pause there. We're going to chop it up. Left tackle, when healthy, Jack Nelson, obviously dealing with a bit of a hand injury. Everybody seems to think he'll be back. So sophomore, Jack Nelson, left tackle, Tyler Beach, left guard, Joe Tippman at center, right guard, Michael Furtney, and right tackle, Riley Mullman, the hulking fresh redshirt freshman. Justin, let's start there. So that's the first string, barring some type of crazy surprise or injury. How are you feeling?
I feel really good about that group. I honestly think that the level of talent that they have across the board there may be the most dominant line we've had in a while. I feel like Beach, and you've said it before, you like him better on the interior. I think that's probably a good spot for him. I think Furtney's a kind of a road grader at right guard, and I think we really like Tippman in the middle. And then Jack Nelson has future first rounder written all over him. Like, he's a guy that's going to be first round, second round type guy, I think, by the time he leaves Wisconsin, whenever that actually is. And Mullman, I think we all felt really strongly about, was a guy who had a very high ceiling. It surprised me a little that Nolan Rucci didn't beat him to it. But, I mean, linemen are tough. Like, it's really hard to get an idea of who's going to kind of grab. This is no disservice to Nolan, who is going to have a very, very good career at Wisconsin before all's said and done. But sometimes guys just jump a little bit ahead. You know, the body comes together a little bit quicker. Maybe the technique comes together a little bit cleaner, or they're at a position that's just easier to get acclimated to.
Well, and, it's funny. Bob Bostad, obviously, we're going to talk about him a bunch in this show, too. Somebody asked him early on what he likes about Riley Mullman, and he was like 6'9", 320. I think he's actually like 6'8", 315, right? But, that was one of the surprises. I wouldn't say surprises.
It's like lineman porn for –
yes.
He's looking at it. He's just like looking at his roster being like, oh, it's 6'7", 315.
It's the pull out, right?
These guys are so
and instead of legs, it's like a big wingspan.
Yeah.
Like, he is so big and athletic that I think a lot of people thought Logan Brown might still win that right tackle spot this year. Obviously, the battle is still kind of ongoing, but I think Logan, we talked about this, and we're going to talk about Logan here in a second. It doesn't mean he's a bust, right? Like,
no.
Riley Mullman is a big time prospect, and that's what I want to throw out there.
That's what we need to get across to everybody who gets low on any of these people. Wisconsin is not on an equal playing field with the rest of the country in terms of what their offensive line room looks like. Wisconsin is sitting there with Notre Dame, Ohio State, Alabama, and a few other schools that are looking at it and being like, hey, we have like this guy here who's like, he's going to be drafted on day 2, or this guy that's going to be drafted on day 3. Mm-hmm. Like, you're looking at a bunch of guys like Logan Brown could start for 1 year and end up going to the NFL and being a great NFL player for 10 years. Like, this is the problem when you look at Wisconsin's room. There's so much depth in there that it's really a battle. It's having the ability to choose what your preference is.
Mm-hmm. Well, in the second string, which we're going to talk really quick, who's on the second string line, the second team line right now. That entire second team line when healthy, you could take that entire 5 and it would start at some programs, in my opinion.
It would start at more than half of the Big Ten.
I'm not sure It's possible. And that even the fact that we're talking about that is nuts, right? So let's do the second team. Practicing at second team right now is the left tackle Nolan Rucci, obviously the 5-star, the younger brother of Hayden. Joe Brunner coming in at left guard. Pretty
impressive.
Interesting for a true freshman running with the 2 deep. Then center Tanner Bordolini, who we love, Bordeaux. Obviously, he's down with a little bit of an injury right now. We're not sure the severity there. In his place, Dylan Barrett's been practicing. JP Benchwall, another 4-star player, is at right guard. And then at right tackle, you have, if Riley Mullman wins the spot, Logan Brown, obviously a 5-star, is the backup there. And behind him, you have Trey Wedding, another big-time 4-star offensive tackle, is the 3rd string right tackle, assuming everybody's healthy. So, I mean, that second string, really quick, I went up and counted it up. I did some high-level math, Justin. There are 8 board certified 4 or 5-star guys. I mean, across the recruiting, everybody 4 or 5-star guys. And there's a couple guys
out of 10.
Out of 11. I think I had 11. There's 8. But there's a couple of dudes like Tippman. Tippman, I didn't count. Tippman was a borderline 4-star guy. Bordolini's not in that group. He's very close, a stud.
With the composite, I believe. Tippman.
So you got 8 4 or 5-star guys on this roster. And quite frankly, the majority of them are sophomores, redshirt freshmen. There's a lot of youth on this roster right here.
Well, and that's the thing that gets interesting with Wisconsin, is you're looking at a bunch of guys here who we may only have for 1 or 2 years. Like Jack Nelson technically is draft eligible this year. And would it shock anybody if he was just lights out at left tackle and ends up going to the NFL? You know, either first rounder or early second round guy. It wouldn't shock me in the least to see him go in the first round. Like, I think he's got that type of skill set and that type of body already, that he's a guy that could very well be told, you're nuts if you stick around another year.
And he's also a guy, like, if you remember, Ryan Ramczyk played 1 year at left tackle and went, right? And Nelson has those type of measurables. And from everything we've heard about Nelson from the moment he stepped on campus, this dude is getting into fights. He's pushing defensive linemen down. Off the field, great dude, right? But he's also got that tenacity.
Well, and he's also got the athleticism. This is a guy that can hang with somebody like Herbig on the edge who's trying to take him and actually stonewall him. So there's not many guys in the Big Ten in general that can play at that level. And it's not like this is a bad league. I'm
going to put you on the spot here. Power rank the top 5 offensive linemen. I didn't ask you this before, so this is just shotgun it, though.
Man.
Who do you think are the top 5 offensive linemen in order on this team right now for this season, not looking 2 or 3 years down the road?
Personal preference, I'm going to say Nelson is my number 1. I'd say number 2 is probably Tippman. I would say, man, those guards, where do I place them? I would probably say Beach is 3, Furtney's 4, and then Mallman's probably 5 out of that. Now, I will say this. If we're going across the 2 deep, I think Bordolini would probably pop in somewhere in that top 5. I don't know where he would be, probably 4 or 5, but I do think that he's legitimately a guy that is that close to being a starter and has that level of talents. Like we talk about 2010 as like the gold standard for Wisconsin. There are guys on that 2 deep that it would not shock me if they were borderline draftable after this year.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think you can look at this 2 deep, and this is the other thing. Maybe we'll end here because we got to kind of move on to the next segment. But, you know, let's say some players get dinged up, right? Logan Brown has to go in. It doesn't hurt you, right? You're not worried. I shouldn't say you're not worried if Logan Brown's starting. You're not worried if Bordolini's starting. You're not worried if Trey Wedding is starting. You're not worried. Like, there is so much talent on this team. Thank you, Joe Rudolph, by the way, who recruited the lion's share of this. It is a very exciting time to be a fan of Wisconsin football, to be a fan of offensive linemen. Coming up next, we're going to talk best case, worst case. I think there's a whole lot of best case with this team, this group that we can talk about. We're going to get into that next on Locked On Badgers. Keep Justin on the show. But first, today's show is brought to you by the National Highway Safety Transport Administration. And it's a very important message. You know, you're hanging out with your friends, putting back a few drinks. We all do that. And a few becomes a few too many. Again, we've all been there. As the evening comes to an end, people start to leave. They go to their homes. They have a ride. They walk out, wherever it is, you're kind of left there trying to figure out what to do. You think about calling a ride, but no big deal, right? You don't live that far away. What are the odds you'll get pulled over? What are the odds that, what's the worst that could happen? Your insurance goes up. Maybe you total your car. Maybe you lose your job. You lose your license. Maybe you kill somebody. Everybody knows the risks of driving drunk. But the results still happen. They're tragic. They're deadly. And it doesn't stop people from continuing to do it. It doesn't stop people from continuing to make those those bad decisions in those moments. It's why police officers are out there right now checking for drivers, impaired drivers on the road to save lives. If you think you're okay to drive after a few drinks, think again. Play it safe, plan ahead, get a ride. It only takes one mistake to ruin your life or someone else's forever. Drive sober or get pulled over. I want to thank everyone again for listening to Locked On Badgers, making this one of your first listens or watches every day, depending on if you're getting us on podcast, YouTube. After this, go check out the Ultimate College Football Preview, 7-episode preview with college experts, local team experts, Odyssey college football experts. It's here. Football's almost here. Check out this awesome preview that's been put together for you, for the college football fan, wherever you find it, Odyssey app, YouTube, wherever you get podcasts, Ultimate College Football Preview. And we're going to bring Justin back on the show. Best case, worst case. So let's start worst case with this one. What could go wrong with this unit?
I think that's honestly, I was going to say, is really the only way I don't see this being a good offensive line. I think that you have people can argue, and I will say this. I think Bostad is a top 3 position coach on the offensive line in college football. I don't know who I'd put there with him.
It sounds like you're talking best case, though.
I know, but let me explain this.
Okay. All right.
My point with that is this. He significantly mitigates what the floor is for a team because he will not put up with it. If it's technique, if it's missed assignments, if it's anything else, he will hammer you. He will move you out of the line and put somebody in there who will get done what he wants done. And I love that. That's exactly what you should be getting out of a coach. Is you should be holding those guys to a standard that's almost superhuman. The worst case scenario is, I would say, it's less effective than we're expecting in the run game, and Wisconsin is a above average run team and mediocre on the pass.
Okay, I mean, you're super bullish because I can paint. Listen, I can be a bit of a pessimist here, right? I can paint, which is usually your job, but I can paint a picture where, listen, Riley Mahlman is a baby at right tackle. It's possible he has some moments against better teams like Beach had last year where he just really struggles in pass protection. I also think it's possible Jack Nelson's also a new tackle. Like, you and I think a lot of Nelson, right? But he hasn't played left tackle. Yeah. So you are breaking into new tackles. I'm
going to say this based off of that. And this is something that I've taken on Kansas as kind of my surrogate extra team outside of Wisconsin, as just a team to follow because I love Leipold. And the offensive line coach from Kansas said something that I thought was very telling, which is technique is great, but I'll take desire and attitude and want over technique any day because that will get it done. And I agree with that. And that's where I think guys like Mahlman and Nelson are going to have a very high floor in that they have athletic tools that most linemen don't have. And I think that there's a mean streak and intensity there that will keep them from being liabilities.
Possible.
Now, I don't think that means they'll be perfect by any means, but I think that means that they won't be a turnstile on either side.
You know what does help this year? And let's transition into best case because you're not giving me a whole lot for worst case here, Justin. 2 brand new tackles. You don't know. All I'm saying. But what does help is you're starting off with Illinois State, Washington State, right? Like you are
lots of time to gel.
You have three teams to kind of gel with up until the point where you get that Ohio State matchup. You're not kicking off the season against the Notre Dame, and then you don't have Penn State right away. Like it is a lot easier to get those early reps. So let's go best case. What is your best case scenario realistic for this offensive line?
My best case scenario would be the second best offensive line team I've ever seen at Wisconsin, behind 2010, which I don't know if we'll ever see that again. And then we see 4 of the 5 guys get drafted, and the only one that's not is Mahlman, who's not eligible.
Wow. So in that case, you're talking 3 or 4 all-conference offensive linemen, like first or second or third team.
I think Nelson has Nelson and Tippman have an outside chance at being all-American caliber guys. I legitimately think they can. I think that Beach is capable of being an all-conference type guard. And I think Furtney can be that too. Yes, I'm very high on what this offensive line is capable of. And I think they have the right guy at the helm to really push them to maximize their ability. He's not gonna be okay with good. He's gonna push these guys to be great, because it's hard to say no to a guy who has put all pros out there. And I'm not talking Pro Bowlers, I'm talking all pros. There's only one all pro team. So if you make it to that level, you're one of the 5 best offensive linemen in the NFL.
Yeah. Some of the highest paid offensive linemen in the last 15 years have been, they've been Bob Bostad coached, So there's a lot of pedigree there for sure. I got to be honest. I think I don't know if the upside's quite that high, because some of these players really need to. We really don't know a ton about Michael Furtney yet either. Like, that's another player that I think he's going to be a solid offensive lineman. I don't know if he's going to be a great offensive lineman.
Well, that's why I don't say all-American type guy with him. I think all-conference doesn't mean first team all-conference. He could be second team. He could be honorable mention. But I do think that he will be in line with that. And I think the offensive line, it's going to be one of those years where everyone's like, well, Wisconsin's offensive line was good because look at how well they ran the football. Because I do think they are going to run the ball like gangbusters this year. Yeah,
I agree with that. And to your point with Bob Bostad, I want to jump in there too. Like, this is not a knock against Joe Rudolph, but I'm just going to straight up say it. Like, Bob Bostad's a better offensive line coach, period.
Yeah.
He just is. Like,
Rudolph is a far superior recruiter.
Yes, that's also true.
And Bostad is possibly the best offensive line coach I've ever seen.
Certainly one of the
attitude and expectation for that position. Like, we've seen videos already this year where they're talking about how they're like, he's going to rep us to death. Like, he's like, you'll be better than the other teams because you're going to have more reps than any other team. So you'll have it down cold.
Right. And he's also, listen, they coach differently too, right? Like, Rudolph did a lot of, we talked about it last year, you and I, he did a lot of just rotations and shifting people around. And I, again, not trying to beat a dead horse here, but I never thought that was really beneficial to the
we never got comfortable.
Never got comfortable.
We shouldn't have been doing it. I understand early in the season, you want to get guys' feet wet for the rest of the season, but those are the wrong teams to do it on.
Yeah, it didn't work. It just didn't work, right? So Bostad is really settled in on you're here. You're going to get the maximum amount of reps playing left guard. You are going to get the maximum amount of reps, Riley Mollman, playing right tackle. And you don't really move much until you master right tackle. And instead of having a bunch of players that you can play 3 spots, he said, no, I'm going to build my 2 deep, because now Tanner Bordelini, you're going to be my second string center. And Joe Bruner, you're going to be my second string right guard or whatever, right? So now it's people are locked in much better, and I think they're able to get the reps they need to develop at those positions much cleaner.
And that's where the phrase "jack of all trades, master of none" comes from. Like, if you're constantly shifting around, you're never getting 100% comfortable, and you can become technically capable, but you're not, honing your craft once you kind of get to that point where it's like you start moving on to the little things that make you that elite guy versus being a very good guy when you're constantly moving around.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you have a couple of those players, like Tanner Bordelini can play everywhere, essentially, right? You have a couple players like that.
He's their swing guy.
He's their swing guy.
He's being kept at center, and they're going to have a master center, but I guarantee he'll be shifted around at guard in practice once he's got everything down cold.
By the way, low key, like we really don't know what his injury status is, so that could be a big blow.
From what I've heard on him, they said it's not season ending, but he's going to be out for a bit.
Yeah, that could be a problem.
It could be a month. Who knows how long it's going to be before we'll see him.
I want to kind of wrap up here and just talk about what, not really nuanced, not a super deep dive, but big picture. Let's go with your version of best case, or at least something close to it. Maybe not the best offensive line since 2010, but close to that, right? So what does that do for Mertz? What does that do for the offense? If you suddenly, because it wasn't all on Mertz last year, right? Like, he got pummeled, especially early in the season. So
it definitely, and that could have very well have affected his play into the year. He got gun shy because of the fact that he was getting beat around. When it comes down to it, the way I look at it is, I think that the pass protection will be good to great. I think that the run offensive line work is going to be great to elite. So I think he's going to, when I say good, it will be above average was definitely above what we're used to seeing from a Wisconsin pass blocking line. From a run standpoint, I just think that they're going to be turned into animals. When you have a coach that pushes you that hard, that mean streak gets triggered, because there's going to be so much angst build up in those guys that they're going to just want to destroy the other team. But I look at it, and the way I look at it from that standpoint is I think that he's going to have sufficient time against everybody, and possibly even against Ohio State. And it's going to come down to the back seven on Ohio State. And we've seen that before. We've seen Wisconsin hold up in the trenches against Ohio State. The issue there was having playmakers make plays, against them half the time. And that's the days we need to get back to. Wisconsin being able to stalemate them in the trenches and saying, all right, well, now we need to get guys open that make plays in the passing game. And where did that happen back in the day when Barry was coach? It was having guys like Chambers or Evans out on the edge that made big plays to help Wisconsin beat Ohio State. And that's what we need to give opportunities to these guys to make those plays. In 2019, we didn't have the guys who could hold off that Ohio State defensive line so that anybody could really, truly get open downfield.
Yeah, we had it's been I feel like it's been a while since we stalemated, or quite frankly, you should be able to win at the line of scrimmage with the way you recruit at Wisconsin on the offensive line. You shouldn't be able to win everywhere else, but at the offensive line versus defensive line versus the front seven, Wisconsin should be able to win as much of those matchups as they lose. So it'll be super interesting to see if that happens this year. Coming up on Locked On Badgers, we're gonna grade the position. I think we know where Justin's probably leaning, but we're also gonna grade it going forward into the future and take a look 2 or 3 years down the road. So that's coming up next on Locked On Badgers. Thank you so much for listening to Locked On Badgers. Really appreciate everybody tuning in, everybody joining the show. Let us know what y'all think about the offensive line preview. Depth chart, who should be starting where, how strong is it? What's your best worst case? Leave the show notes in the YouTube. We try to talk to them. We do a user show really once a month if we can. So we're going to get one of those before the season as well. So we try to get all your comments on here so we get the discourse, build that Badger community. Justin, let's get it. Grade for this year.
All right. I'm gonna break this into 2 different grades.
Oh, I like it.
In terms of talent, I'm gonna give it an A+. In terms of experience, I'm gonna give it a B+. And that's because there are some new faces and spots that are highly athletically talented guys that as you were kind of hinting at, we don't really know what level they'll play at. Now, I'm very confident with them, perhaps overconfident, but I really think that Bostad was a home run. And I think a lot of the things that we've heard in some of these interviews from him show that his level of expectation is just simply higher than almost anybody. Like he was not happy with the status that he came into in that room. And that's telling to me because this is Wisconsin. So if your expectations are right off the bat are above just about everybody else's, and now you have a guy coming in there saying we're not doing what Wisconsin should be doing on the offensive line. And that's, a big deal to me. So I would say if we're going to average that out, it's probably hinting at an A-, but it's up there.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair. I mean, I went B+ for just this year. I went B+. So if you're A-, B+, I just think I need to see it with Mollman.
Yeah. And that's exactly it.
Even Nelson a little bit at left tackle. And quite frankly, even Furtney a little bit. I think I believe in the parts. And to your point, I'm 100% on board with Bostad as well. I think it's the best coaching move we made in the offseason. And I love Bobby Ingram coming in. I think it's the best coaching move we made. So I love it there. I just think there's some youth in some spots. I think Tippman's a monster, right? I really like Beach but that's another one, right? We didn't even talk about it. We have to see Beach at guard too. I think it's a good move for him, but we don't really know. We haven't really seen it because if you remember last year before the season, the coaching staff said, Beach is ready to go. And I mean, he was a preseason all Big Ten second or third team guy. And then we saw the season happen and we're like, wow, he is not ready. So,
well, I think he was miscast as a left tackle. Like he was, we agreed that he probably fit better on the right side if he was going to be anywhere.
And he was a good run blocker last year.
Yeah, I think that I think we would agree that after I feel pretty confident we're going to come away from the ceiling seeing him as a plus guard, where it will be that's going to be the position he gets drafted at.
Yeah, that's what I believe as well. So I'm there as well. But that's the only thing keeping me from being like, this is an A+ unit. There's just a couple pieces we need to see how they gel, but I'm there with you. Future grade. Look 2-3 years down the road with recruiting going on right now, last year's recruiting cycle, the young talent on this roster. What would you grade this position group looking a couple years down the road?
I'm going to stick with an A on that. And I say this because there's going to be a mix coming in here. We have the guys that have the recruiting rankings that are in there, and now you're going to get the guys who Bostad brings in that are effectively like rabid dogs to play offensive line. And I think that you and I, that's one of the things that I've argued potentially was the change that we saw from Wisconsin. That 2010 line those were some mean dudes. Like they wanted to destroy the team across. And when you watched them play against Ohio State, they were getting 5 yards push sometimes on the defensive linemen. And I don't think we've had a lot of guys that we've looked at and said, that dude's a mean dude. Now Nelson's one of those guys, but he seemed like kind of the outlier at the offensive line position over the last few years. And I think that Bostad, that's something he greatly looks for in an offensive lineman, is he wants that intensity. He wants that meanness, because he's like, if push comes to shove and your technique's not perfect, I believe in the guy who's the angrier guy and the one who's going to get more physical than the guy who is more concerned with trying to out-athlete the other side. Because we see this all the time in the NFL. Athleticism is great, but there's a lot of grinders that pull out 12-year careers in the NFL who aren't necessarily perfect left tackles or right tackles. They're just guys that do the little things and maximize whatever it is that they have.
Yeah, and there's a lot of great athletes that it never comes together for. I'm gonna say I think it's an A+. Honestly, A+. I think the future of this position, we talked about the 8 4 and 5 star guys. Outside of Tyler Beach, theoretically, they could all be here next year. And
it's true.
4 or 5 of them could be here 2 years from now. So there is a tremendous amount of young talent that we talk. Now, everyone knows college football. Half of those guys could transfer, right? Half of those guys could get hurt. We don't know, but the talent in the pipeline's there. And then I really like Joe Bruner, brought him in, the 4-star in-state offensive lineman, offensive tackle guard. And if you look at this year's cycle, Christopher Turek,
another one of those guys with a mean streak.
Big, 6'6", 290-pound guy, probably the best recruit in this class, just from a ranking standpoint. And then I really like James Durand, who the interior offensive lineman out of Arizona. He's a guy, when you watch on film, very similar to, like, he plays until the whistle blows. And then even then, like, it's kind of, hey, bro.
Yeah. It's not shocking to me that Brunner's the guy that got into the 2 deep, because we talked about him, when he was the guy that got recruited in, that he was by far the meanest of the guys that were coming in or potentially coming in out of him.
Ton of upside.
He was the guy.
Sad.
Yeah, I'm still sad.
Billy Strouth and Carson Hinsman, man.
But he was the animal out of the 3 of them in terms of intensity.
Yeah, he was the highest ranked one as well. He was the highest rated offensive lineman out of that group, obviously.
So I think he's a kindred spirit with Bostad in terms of, like, I want to destroy who's across from me.
Well, and again, to your point, the fact that he's already in the 2 deep as a true freshman, Badger fans, put that in the back of your head. And 2 years from now, don't be surprised when he is like an all world.
Some Travis Frederick corollaries there.
Right, for sure. All right, man. That's the show. Offensive line preview is much more enjoyable than quarterback preview for many reasons. I think we'll have you back again if you want to jump on the defensive side. We got a bunch more to do before the season. And for everyone listening, really want to say thank you. For Justin, obviously, thank you again for jumping on. Always insightful. Thank you for listening to Locked On Badgers. We're going to talk to you guys tomorrow. Continue the football previews. Got some more recruiting content coming up. Did a really good interview with Jason Jordan, the Sports Illustrated recruiting director for basketball today. A bunch of really cool nuggets from that. So a bunch of content coming up. Appreciate everyone. If you like the show, leave a listen, like, subscribe, do all that stuff. And until tomorrow, we'll talk to you soon.